Mhm.
Okay, hello. This is Stacy Sylvester, and we are kicking off with the human experience. Today is our second episode, which we're really excited about. We have been invited Andrea Powell to be our guest for tonight's episode. And Andrea and I have known each other, I guess, since 2014, when I was able to bring a women's group to one of the women's project events that she had hosted. And we kind of connected that day and have stayed in contact throughout the years in different facets. And so Andrea has been a really great advocate for the women in Hardin County. We've met and talked to colleagues in terms of trying to get some support for women out there, and has been a great asset to me personally. And I've been grateful to know her. And so wanted to kind of bring her on today so that we could talk and continue to share our experience with our audience. So, hello.
Hello. That's
Welcome.
nice. Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So we're excited to have you today. We're going to kind of roll through just a series of some questions, and really we just want to hear on your thoughts and not necessarily a time limit. I believe in just allowing the spirit to kind of move us as we go through it and see what happens. So,
Oh, I second that. Okay.
so talk to us a little bit about kind of your passion in working with women and kind of where you're at with that.
Okay, so that began, like you said, we met about 2014. And actually, how I got into this role, what I'm doing now with the Women's Project, working with women of substance abuse and domestic violence, I actually got in this role because I was actually applying for a position in a school, and I asked for a referral or a reference letter. And the lady at the time who I asked, I used to work with her at the crisis unit.
Okay.
And she said, well, actually, I have a position that I think you would be good for. And my background is with children, early development, early childhood, adolescence. Like my whole background was children, residential, day treatment, like all that. I've never been like my main focus was adults. And so she said, well, it's working with women, substance abuse and domestic violence. And I just looked at her like, I have no idea how to do that. But if you give me training and you think I'll be good, I'll take it. So she said, yes, I think you'll be good. We'll definitely send you to training, which I'm sad because Kentucky school this year was canceled. And
Right.
that was my training.
Mm-hmm.
My foundation in this role was at Kentucky school.
Sure.
So anyway, so kind of fast forward a little bit, I was getting ready to start that position, and I was a newlywed. I had just married. And so at that time, the person I was married to started to show his colors.
Oh,
And right before I started this position with the Women's Project, I had my personal experience with domestic violence. And so I just remember how that made me feel in that whole dark time. And so I remember going to her saying, I have an issue. I was in the court system and all that stuff. I was like, I don't think I would be good in this position because, here I am faced with that same issue that I'm supposed to help other women with. And I just never forget her words was like, because of that, you'll be excellent for this position. So
wow.
she said, I'm not accepting your resignation.
Okay.
We're going to push forward. And so I did. And everything that I had experienced throughout my first marriage, I guess I'd say did some self-healing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I use to heal me is what I figured, well, if this works for me, maybe it work for other women. So that's how that came about, is the women's events, like doing the holistic approach of the wellness wheel and having other women. I really believe that women empower women. So I
Absolutely.
wanted other women to come and, enlighten and educate and encourage other women, and we feed off of that. And so that's kind of how that grew out of that.
Can I ask you a personal question, just a little bit deeper question about
Mhm.
where you found the courage and the strength to kind of go to your boss and be honest about kind of what was going on? Like, where did you find that push to kind of do that part?
I don't think it was really at that time. I didn't look at it as courage. I just was like, I'm a bunch of legal crap right now, and I don't think I could be at the courts for my legal stuff and still trying to help someone else advocate for their legal stuff.
Okay.
So I just was being just transparent. Is what
Okay.
it was. I was being transparent and just telling her this is where I'm at and this is my situation. And like I said, she said nope. this will
Mhm.
make you the perfect person more than anybody. So
Were you surprised by her response at that? Like, were you surprised at how
yes.
warm and kind of like embracing that was?
Oh my gosh, yes, that I cried.
Mhm. I
It
bet you
washed over
did.
me and it gave me um a sense of support, you
Mhm.
know. So I
Mm.
was like, well, okay.
Well, and I
She
know that.
supports me in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's phenomenal because, one of the things that you and I had talked about from that first women's group and that first sort of um, that first project that you guys had opened up your doors, at least that we had participated in,
Hmm.
had a
Hmm.
massive emphasis on support. Can you
Hmm.
talk about the necessity and the value of support going through those kind of times?
Yeah, so actually when you guys came, I think that was like my fourth event I had did by then.
Okay.
Um, my support came definitely from my family. Um, I have an aunt that I call her my wind beneath my wings.
Mm.
And so she was like, whatever you need, I got you, you know? And so, and at that time I was separated from, my first husband. And so, the depression set in and all those things you go through and, with like a loss,
Sure.
and so she really spoke to me and dragged me out of my little cocoon and had me attend events with her and her girlfriends. We went to, I took me to women events. My mom was sending me stuff and telling me about different activities to do. So my mom's in Ohio. So she was
Oh,
sending
okay.
me stuff like, here's stuff here. And, I found this lady in Kentucky who's doing this. Maybe you can partake in that. And so really, I just immersed myself in anything that said women conference, women empowerment, women in the title. I was all over it. And so um, I think where it really started to my healing, like I said, I went to a spiritual, I did all areas because I went to a spiritual events, I did social events, like, so, it was like the whole circumference of a person was being met. And so when I kind of was able to stand on my own 2 feet, I was like, I think I would like to have this for other women. So the first event we had was just for the shelter here and for clients at the agency I work for. And I just asked women like that I felt were good speakers and who were truly authentic and genuine to would they participate in that event, and they were like yes, yes, yes. And so it went from the speakers said they would do it and they would bring their like goodies, and then some other women said they volunteered to watch the kids. So the kids had activity and the women could do their thing. And then people said, well, have you asked this person? I know this person. And then we ended up getting goodie bags. And we kind of, it just kind of just grew from there. And so that's how the first one went. And then there's like, well, you had it in E-Town. Can you bring it here? Can you bring it here? And so that's kind of how it branched out to like, we just started having different areas and just basically having women come and talk to other women, and they love the idea, to empower another person. So that's kind of how it went. But my experience was that I got healing
Mhm.
from other women, and so I sent the power in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you remember, like in kind of all of those events and that experience, do you remember that moment in time when you kind of stepped back and you were like, oh, this is why I'm kind of here? Or like, do you remember having that moment, or did you have that moment where you're just kind of like, where it all sort of came full circle and you're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, I realized when that mess became my message,
Yeah.
and so that's when I realized. So that's when I realized that I can help other women um, kind of go along with them through that journey.
Okay. Well, and I think we had a little bit of tech, so you froze for a second in
Okay.
that kind of conversation. But like, so you're saying that you realize like that you could kind of be like an advocate or a light for these other women?
Yes, yes. Um, I said, well, basically, I guess, my whole reason was let them know they're not alone,
Sure.
and so let them know there's other people who can kind of partner with them and stand beside them on that journey. And the funny thing is, as I was asking other women to speak, um, the other side of that is when I told them about my event and my passion and why I wanted to do this, they shared their experience, and I realized like nobody is um, untouched by this,
Mm.
domestic violence and so forth. So They even, professional women who were coming to share and be our guest speakers were telling their own personal stories about how domestic violence either hit them directly or, indirectly by a friend, a family member, a parent or whatever. So,
hmm If you could have a magic wand to kind of support the women that you're working with right now, or if there's something that you could say, hey, if I could pick this one thing, this is what I would do for women. What would you do for women in that kind of situation, or that is healing and growing? And for lack of better words, I like a lot of times when I think about people and their experience, I'm a fan of like the rise. I love Maya Angelou's and Still I Rise kind of concept.
Mhm.
What would you give to the rising women or men? I'm not even to necessarily discriminate, but we're
Yeah.
talking about women. What would you say? What would you do?
I have that magic wand. I think the main thing most people need to see that this is just a snapshot or just a chapter of their book. It's not the end of the book.
Okay.
It's not the final picture. So hope and let them know that this too will pass. And let them know that even though you feel this pain and this deep sorrow and all the things, there will be a day when you'll smile again. There will be a day when you will find joy and comfort, and it will be a distant memory.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Excellent. Well, and as you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking about when the day you and I had talked, and we had talked about like topics for today's group or today's discussion,
Mhm.
and you can tell I do a lot of groups, right? Everything goes to group in my mind. But we were talking about today's show and kind of what that was going to look like, and the topics. We had kind of talked about self-forgiveness and kind of moving
Mhm.
into like a process of forgiveness. Can you talk about sort of the line between feeling like a lot of times people will talk about forgiveness and they'll say, well, if I forgive, it's like letting the person off the hook, or it's like saying what they did was okay. And, I think it's very blurry between telling people like you can live in and walk into forgiveness without saying somebody's behavior and what they did was all right. How do you kind of navigate that for yourself? And how would you help women kind of understand like that there is forgiveness and kind of what that does for them?
Mhm. So when I was talking about forgiveness, it's mainly, like I said, forgiveness of yourself first, because a lot of women, like, how did I let this happen? How can I put myself in a situation? I never saw myself like that. So they beat themselves up more than the perpetrator, really.
Sure.
Um, and so the whole thing I talk about the self forgiveness, like you have to forgive yourself because love is of the heart, and you don't choose who fall in love with. It could be anybody, and so. And when you're in love, like I say, when you're in love, you do stupid things, and you take a lot of things that you standing on the outside would not. It's easy to say, I wouldn't take that. I wouldn't take this from that person, whatever. But when you're inside, it's a whole different ballgame.
Sure.
And so a lot of times I talk to women just about forgiving themselves. And um, the other thing about, forgiving your perpetrator, as far as it's not for them. Like you don't say, I forgive you.
Right.
It's really that you say that in your heart because it's for you. Because if, like the old saying is, if having hate in your heart against a person, it's like you drinking poison thinking the other person's going to die.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. It only hurts you. So you talk about forgiving the other person, but at the same time, just because you forgive them, I mean, you have to go back and relive it. You don't have to reconnect. You put those boundaries up, and and all that kind of stuff. But forgive them for what they've done to you, and at the same time, forgive yourself for what has been done to you, and then really kind of just see where you want to take your journey from there. I
Okay.
mean, a lot of women I work with, they go back. I mean, we that's statistics. Usually, they go back 7 times, before they actually leave the perpetrator. Um, so even to get them to, sometimes when you get them to forgive themselves, that's healing enough that they don't go back because they don't feel like they're unworthy. You
Sure.
know. Yeah.
And Andrea, as I'm listening to you talk, like, so let's say we have a woman watching today and she's hearing what you're saying and she wants what you have and she is like, man, I am tired of going back and I do want to find that worth and I do want to find that forgiveness. Where
Hmm.
does a person start? Like, where does, and that's kind of why I asked you that question about courage. Like, where does that person find that sort of, I'm tired.
Mhm.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, part of my, like I was telling you about when I was going through my situation, I had my moments where I left and went back, a few times. And so my aunt told me very clearly, she said, when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you will stop.
Okay.
And so everybody's kind of breaking point, we use that word a lot, breaking point is different, or the threshold of what they can handle. So I can't say that just at this point or this time when that would be for that person, but when a woman knows that she's done and she has had enough and she wants something different, then that's where I would say the place to reach out would be like, we have, Kentucky has domestic violence shelters all over the whole state. Reach out to that, to the shelter in your area, and that's what they're there for.
Okay.
And so, and that's where you start, your new journey can start. If you need a place to go, they have the shelter. If you need advocacy, they'll help you. If you got to do some court stuff, they'll go with you through that whole process. Lucky for me, I didn't have to go that route as far as going to the shelter because I had family. I didn't have to do the advocacy route. As far as using the agency, I had a very good friend that went with me through my whole journey. I'm a colleague. So she went with me through my court cases and all that stuff. And she was like my rock with me. And so I had that person. So I didn't really have to use the agency. But for people who don't have that, that's what they're there for.
Hmm. Well, and one of the things, somebody who is very, very dear to me, one of my best friends was the survivor, is the best way, of a pretty significant domestic violence episode. And one of the things that I noticed in talking to her, and this has been probably a little over 2 years ago now, is sort of the
Mm-hmm.
residual effects. I think people think, oh, well, just flee, just go to a treatment program or just go to a center and just like it's just going to be over, just get away and it'll all be fine. Can you talk a little bit about the healing process, kind of the milestones, or just if that's not too personal? Do you care to talk a little bit about sort of the milestones and maybe not just for yourself, but for the women that you've kind of dealt with or worked with? What's your thoughts on that?
So leaving is like the first step, obviously. That's not the immediate healing. You got to do a lot of work for the healing. And I can't say if you were in there 2 years, it'll take 2 years of healing. If you were with this person 20 years, it'll take 20 years of healing. Each person is different. But for one, you have to face it. You got to go through that whole grievance process. And that's the curriculum I use with the women at the shelter I teach. The whole grieving process, you have to, get to a point where you accept it, and then you want the redirected hope, and you want to change the path of your life. But I mean, it could take a while. Some women have other things lying in there. Like I didn't have a substance use issue on top of that. I didn't have kids on top of that. So some other women have so many other layers laid on top of that. They got to weave through all of that before they, and as women, we always put ourselves last.
Sure.
We deal with everybody first, and then we'll get to us. And when it comes to this situation, you have to put yourself first, because if you're not good and well, you can't help anybody else. And the saying is, you can't pour from an empty cup. So if
Hmm.
you have nothing left to give, because you're not putting into yourself, you can't help anyone else. You can't help, you're there for your kids. You can't help, your situation if you have to go through the legal system, judicial system, or whatever else. So it's a process, and it takes time. I mean, even myself, like, I talked to my sisters about what I went through. I had my sisters in that situation as well, like as far as telling them what I was going through and feeling, just kind of encouraging me. I built what I call myself a little tribe around me. So I had my sisters, I had my mom, my aunt, I had my best friend, and a couple of colleagues. And so they all just poured into me and prayed over me. And just, if I need to talk, they were there for me to talk. But even to this day, like I'm not in a situation, I'm in a totally different area in my life. I still have remnants. That's why I can say remnants of that issue. Sometimes a thought may flutter. I hear a sound or a song or something, but trigger, we call those triggers, will put me back in that moment for a minute. Or it can even be sometimes I have in my dreams, that person still comes in my dreams. And so it's as you heal, it gets less and less as an issue, but it still is there. So you just got to learn those coping skills and how to deal with it. And my best way is to talk about it. Don't hide it, and don't be shameful about it. Talk about it. So I'll talk about it, like I said, to my best friend or to my sister, and say, I had this weird dream. Let me tell you what happened, and so forth. So
Do you feel like there are things that people have said to you, and, good people have great intentions, and sometimes they say things that are just off the wall crazy, and you're like, yeah, that was really not so super supportive, or I wish you had not said fill in the blank. Do you have any advice for like people that want to support maybe somebody that's going through this, or because everybody has an entourage of great things to say to people, but if this is your daughter or your sister or your mom, or do you have any advice for somebody who's maybe a supporting person who doesn't know what to do, how to help?
Yeah, so the things I heard that were not helpful, and at the time, and actually they were kind of hurting because you want to prove them wrong. But like for instance, I was like, you hear people say, well, you just need to leave him, or I knew from the beginning he wasn't good for you, or those kind of things. They'll say, well, that's kind of not helpful when you're in that situation, because it makes you think, well, I'm gonna show you, you don't know what's really going on, and so it puts you in a defensive mode versus them being you're looking at them as your helper. You know what I'm saying? So you become
Okay.
defensive and you pull back from them. So that was definitely something that was very hurtful. As far as things that people see someone, their loved one, and they want them to get out and they want them to be safe, how they can help is I'm a spiritual person, so I just put that out there. So the number one thing is pray. Just pray and be a listening ear. We are given one mouth and two ears for a reason. You're supposed to listen twice as much as you speak. So if they call you or they're venting, just listen. Don't give your opinion. Don't give any comments. Just listen, because sometimes they need to just hear it and work themselves out, work it out themselves. But if they know you're going to say something, you got something abrasive to say, or, going to snap back at them, they're going to stop calling. They're going to stop sharing. And then you're really going to be concerned because you're not going to know what they're going through and how bad it could be.
Okay.
So my first, pray, pray for the situation, and two, just listen. It doesn't matter, if they leave and go, how many times, just listen. Because the moment you put up a barrier and they feel like they can't come to you, that may be that one time that they were ready to leave, but they was like, dang, now I'm definitely not going to go there, or I'm not going to call that person because of how you make them feel.
It kind of feels like judgment after a little while.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Wow, yeah, and I could see that. And like I said, I think that it's kind of one of those situations, yeah, and it's one of the things that we'll talk a lot about in the work that we do, where people will just say, if you loved us, you would stop. If you loved me, you'd stop, in terms of addiction. And it's kind of one of those things where they're asking it, but usually the person who's dealing with it is asking them the same question, like, why can't I just stop? Why can't I just stop?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I would think that that would be sort of a thought process as well. Like, why do I go back? Or why do I
Mm-hmm.
keep kind of put myself in this situation? Um, do you know who Lisa Nichols is?
I do not.
So Lisa Nichols, I don't know a whole lot about her in terms of background story. Like, I know that she's a motivational speaker, but something that she said in one of the motivational videos that I watched is ringing true as I'm listening to you talk. So I wanted to kind of see what you thought about it. She made a comment in one of the videos that I watched where she said, people don't decide to like get into domestic violence relationships. Like, people don't say, hey, you know what, I can't wait for this to happen. And she said people don't tend to overlook massive demonstrations of like abuse or violence, but what people tend to do is overlook the small warning signs that lead to the big bang.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
she talked about sort of how, like, I didn't fall in love with a partner who was domestic from the beginning. I didn't fall in love with that environment, but that I chose to overlook these tiny warning signs. And that
Mm-hmm.
for her in that story, she was able to talk about how it was healing, because it kind of gave her power back by saying, you know what, I'm not incapable of preventing this in the future. I just have to become stronger and more diligent about paying attention to the warning signs
Mm-hmm.
when they
Mm-hmm.
show up. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I wholeheartedly agree with that. Yeah, most definitely. The other thing I want to touch on, a lot of times women who find themselves in a situation is, I'm not going to say all the time, but most of the time there's some undealt trauma, underlying trauma that hasn't been dealt with. Um, and so that's kind of putting them out there. As I use the analogies when I talk to the women. I said, if you're broken, you attract other broken people. I said, so, but when you heal, you attract a different caliber of people. I put it to the terms as like a prey and a predator. If an animal is wounded, the predator can smell that, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the one they go after. That's the weak one of the flock. That's the weak one of the pack that they go after. So if you're wounded or broken, they're going to come for you because you're an easy target, so to speak. I don't want to say, make it, I'm not trying to be mean about it, but I'm just saying in that terms. Because a lot of times women who are in a situation, it's not their first one, it's not their second one. They've had repeatedly many partners who had abused them.
Sure.
It's like a pattern. And so some of the things talk about, why do I keep getting the same kind of men? And I throw back, well, why do you think you keep attracting the same kind of men? So I
Mm-hmm.
say, sometimes instead of fishing in the pond, you might want to go fish in the lake. You keep shopping, fishing in the same area, you're going to keep getting the same kind of fish. So it's a lot of things, with that. But I think I agree with that statement for real. And when you're trauma filled, you do overlook a lot of the little stuff, because we are trained, when you're in trauma, you're trained to see the big one. But there's a lot of little things that kind of get you to the big one,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I loved it. Like I said, I really liked the way that she described that, because I feel like, a lot of times when we work with women and we're talking about trauma, like, it's so overwhelming to try to tackle the whole thing, because like you said, it's so complex, right? There's all kinds of layers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when we talk about, breaking down some of those small warning signs, like, why did we excuse, why do we misplace jealousy for love? Or
Mm-hmm.
like, it kind of those things where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, look, he's so sweet, look how jealous he is, and then it's like not
Yeah.
so sweet when it's everybody,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's just, we're just young, so we're playing back and forth, and yeah, it's okay for him to play push me or play. And one of the heartbreaking things, for example, I did, is I work with my teenage girls, and we did a what's my name exercise, and these are the kids between like 13 and 17. And
Mm-hmm.
how many of them said that their boyfriends would call them like dope whore, and how many of them would be called like, just these horrible names, and they're like, oh, but he's just playing,
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know
So that's setting at the beginning of it. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's kind of that. Yeah, so it starts that mindset of like, oh, harm or abuse or things that hurt are just a joke. And so it kind of sets us up like, oh, well, I'm not worthy of standing up for myself, and if I do, then all these other names that they like to be called. And so I wanted to know, like, what do you think about that? Like, do you think that sometimes it is like not a conditioning, that's not probably the right word to use, but like, do you think that people kind of get conditioned to be comfortable in that lack of like worthiness, or like being treated as if they're not worthy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, some of that comes from the trauma, whatever it could be. It could be from, coming from a family that has alcoholism, to, childhood sexual abuse, or whatever. They're already coming with this relationship with their baggage. And then that person they're with has their baggage, and so two alphas can't be in a relationship. So someone has to be the more stand back one. And so most of the time it is the woman, because a male will elevate himself to be, and in our society, the man is supposed to be the head of the house, the roost, the king of the castle, whatever you want to use. So most of the time the women will fall back a little bit. But one thing I do realize, and I try to help the women understand, is you teach people how to treat you.
Sure.
And what I mean by that is, if they call you a name and you don't say nothing about it, your silence is condolence.
Hmm.
So then they do it again and you don't say anything. So now you're creating that pattern. So you're letting them call you out of your name because you're not standing up for yourself. It just takes one time, to say, hey, that's not my name. I'm not, we're not rolling like that. But so it starts with that one acceptance of that negative pattern. Then there's another one, and then like you said, those layers become, and then eventually you're groomed to just, they
Just
give you what
tolerate.
they give you. Mm-hmm. They give you what they give you, and you accept what you get.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's really important because, if we have young women kind of watching our show tonight, or, moms of young girls, I think it is super important for us to talk about that stuff. Like, I know a lot of times kids will say, oh, it's just a joke, it's just a joke. But man, there's so much value. Like, I feel like you can tell where somebody places your value based on what they call you.
Right, right, right.
And I agree with you in terms of, like, we teach people how to treat us based on what we do and don't do, or what we respond to and don't respond to, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So through this process, and like I said, I know you've talked a lot about sort of self-forgiveness and kind of using the support group and calling on faith. You had talked a little bit about, like, self-development and kind of growth from this. So it reminds me again of that sort of phoenix that rises from the ashes. Tell me about that part of the journey for you, just the kind of, and now we fly type of thing.
Man, I don't even know where that started, because I think, I think the way I felt like I started to rise and came out the ashes, as you sort of speak, is when I began to not be silent about my issue and to tell my story.
Okay.
And I think the one time I told my story, I told a colleague, and she shared her stuff, and I was like, wow, and then I said something to another colleague, and just my thing is, like, I want to be transparent as possible, because I was wearing that shame for a while, and it's like, that's not the hat I wanted to wear.
Okay.
Because, like I said, I got into this position right when I had my situation with domestic violence. So as I was learning my position, I was learning all the strategies and techniques and statistics and all that stuff of this position. So at the same time, while I'm trying to heal, I'm also learning, And so what I did was, I took my learning and said, okay, apply it to myself. And so once I applied it to myself, I was like, okay, now I can help others. But like I said, like, you can't pour from an empty cup. So I had to heal myself first.
Sure.
I had to work on me. And so once I felt like I was, at a good place, a safe place, and I was strong enough to say, okay, now let me help the next one. And so that's when I began to tell my story and just share, and and just from telling different women my story, there was like, and then, like I said, my mom sent me some information. My best healing, I would tell you this, probably when I really rose, I went to a women's retreat in the cabins in Tennessee. And it was like 30 of us. And so what she did, and I will say her name is Rashonda Jackson. She's a Johnson. She's amazing. It's called Cupcakes and Cabins. And so she has that every year. And so I went to that, which was my first time going there after my whole moving from that situation, being dismissed from that. And so just listen to the women. We had this part where it was real talk, like nothing was off limits, uncensored, raw conversation. And so, but how they did it was, which I like, was you put your question or your comment in anonymous, and then she'll pull them out. So you don't have to say it, if you don't feel comfortable. She'll read it, and then people chime in. And so I had put my comment in there, and my comment was, how do you start life after divorce? Or is there life after divorce? I think is what I put in there. And so all these women just kind of chimed in. I mean, that was the biggest topic of the night, because, all other women have been through that, and they shared their story. And just hearing their story empowered me. And so that's how I think I started to get a little air and wind beneath my wings and started. So that's, I said, well, them telling their story empowered me. Let me tell my story. And just from that, it grew until the first women's event, and just kind of went from there. So I would say the moment I rise is when I open my mouth to speak.
All right. I love that. I think that's fantastic. I do, because, we talk about, one of the greatest antidotes to shame is honesty, right? Being authentic and speaking our story. And as you were talking, I was thinking, man, that is so incredible. Yeah. Like, there's so much power and value in just sharing our story and kind of speaking on what our experience has been. But you actually raised a good topic that I didn't really think a lot about until you just brought it up. Do you have a lot of women talk to you about, like, that idea about divorce? Like, how heavily does that weigh in on a person's decision to leave or to not leave? Like, I don't want my kids from a divorced family, or, I don't, kind of, what's been your experience with women talking about that?
Yeah, a lot of times women, divorce usually is the main reason they don't want to leave is the security financially. You know, like they're the stay-at-home mom and they make work. So that's where all the finances come from. So their fear is like, if I leave, how am I gonna take care of my kids? I'm gonna take care of myself, you know. So that's the first thing is financially concerned. And then the second one is like they want to have that portrayal of a perfect family.
Sure.
You know, so if I leave, then that how's they're not gonna have a relationship with their dad or this and the other, and relationships can happen on different levels. It doesn't have to be living in the house, you know. But that's the second one. They don't want to leave because of their kids. So most of the time they will endure it for their kids. I'm thinking, a lot of times, you think the kids don't know, but I bet you if you ask them, talk to them, they know that you're hurt and you're in pain, and they know what goes on more than you think.
Sure.
And so you staying in this situation for your kids is not really healthy, So then we talk about the effects of domestic violence on kids, like for males, they can become kind of groom them to be perpetrators. For women, they be, they can, for the daughters, groom them to be, victims, So what are you teaching your kids?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
So
they're in our front row audience all the time.
yeah, yes, they're soaking it all up. So divorce is definitely for women who are married. That's the main concern. But then again, you have people who are not married. Like I said, families look all different. Who they're just living together. They're not married. They have kids together. Again, he makes all the money, she doesn't, and so again, that fear of leaving is like, how will I survive? How will I go on? How can I meet my needs and my kids' needs without any money? Which, I mean, that's a true concern. And I just think a lot of women just don't know about the other programs that are out there. So many programs are out there that will help, and learn a skill or trade. You go to school, so much out there that you haven't thought of, and they just don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, I would get that. Absolutely, I get that. Well, and so you mentioned and it's kind of a personal question, so you're welcome to choose not to answer.
Uh-huh.
What answer did you find when you asked that question that kind of spoke to your soul? What did you get your answer? Like
What's
what's
that?
after divorce?
Yeah, so the answer I got was, I mean, I'm looking at these phenomenal women, okay, like look like they got their stuff together. They're confident, they're strong, they're so opinionated, they use their voice. And so I got my answer because when they shared their story, and they realized, okay, they were broken too, and they had to work to get to that point. So a lot of times you see the glory, but you don't know people's story.
Right.
And so so when I heard the story, it's like, oh, okay, they came from a place of brokenness and they healed, and they changed a different direction. That's how they got there. A lot of times it is you find your power from your point of weakness. That's just how it happens. Mm-hmm.
I love one of the messages I feel like you keep reiterating over and over again, and I'm listening to you and I'm loving it, because one of the things that I'm hearing you say, like seriously, over and over again, is how strong and powerful that nature of connection is, like that feeling of not being alone. So whether it be that you are in that position of being the light, or that you're in the position of following the light of somebody else, but that somebody, just that idea, like you don't have to do this by yourself. Our stories are not necessarily picture perfect in terms of the exact same, but the healing part and the rise part, like this idea that if I can do it, you can do it.
Exactly. And the thing about it is, even if they can tell you their journey, and everything, you don't have to do exactly for them, but I think you had said this one point in time too. You said just pick the parts that you can and leave the rest. So pick the parts that you can use, and what you can't use, just let that fall on the wayside. So that's kind of what I got from everyone's story. Hearing everyone's story, it was like, okay, I can do that. I ain't doing that, but I can do that. And just kind of and just at least I had, and then I had like a blueprint, a little blueprint of how to start moving on with my life.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is so fantastic. Because, for me, I'm a solution focused person. I am all about picking up those puzzle pieces and rebuilding. I'm always talking about building a life worth living. I'm always talking about kind of life after, what chapter, next chapter, like what are we going to do next? And so when you start talking about self-development and just kind of growing from that place, do you feel that there are still areas that you're like, man, I really want to focus on this? Do you feel like there's areas that you still want to nurture and cultivate for yourself? As a woman on the rise, what are you going to do?
Yeah, my whole, and my one of my colleagues and good friends, she's always saying, she sees me when I was doing my women's event, she said, that is your calling, to do like those events, those conferences, those kind of things. And I said, yeah, I would love to do that, but that's a lot of work because that was in conjunction to my everyday tasks and duties. It's not like I can only work on that because I still have to see clients, so I do paperwork, so I do bill, so I do my stuff. But what I see for myself in that situation is, like you said, on the rise, is being able to go back to my dream. And I had a little committee, we were meeting for a little bit before it got nixed, but my dream would be to have a women's convention in Hardin County.
Okay.
They have them in Texas, they have them in Atlanta, they have them, Women's Expo, that's what they call them, Women's Expo. That would be my dream, to have that in Hardin County, a Women's Expo, where it's all women, everything, on every aspect, from financial, emotional, social support, everything, spiritual, everything. And, under one roof, and just, different topics, people speaking on each one, different vendors set up. Like, that would be my ideal dream. So I still got some breath in me and some life in me, so it may happen. I may have to retire before I can do it, but
You're not enough to retire. We're just getting started. What do you mean? We're just getting rolling in this. We're going to be around for a long time. Well, and I'm glad, and I'm grateful that you were able to kind of come on in here and talk to me about this stuff, because, one of the things that I'm learning as we go through this, and I jokingly, but not jokingly, went back and forth about a title for this sort of series. And again, for those of you guys watching, we're not like movie experts. We're not like, YouTube or podcast superstars. We're just like women having a conversation about real life. And so, I wanted to kind of put that out there because, this is the human experience. This is, that all people go through something. All people experience, and although my story might not have the same pieces of yours, that we can kind of still come together united and say, what do we need to do to move forward? The most valuable part in this is saying, I may have some strengths in some areas that you're struggling, and vice versa. How do we make each other whole? And I think a lot of times when you were talking about people that kind of get preyed on, especially women, and I'm not saying this is true for all women, but for a lot of us, we're taught two things. Either we're taught that we're safer in numbers and we connect to women and we're good at that, or we're taught that women are sort of our competitors and our enemies, and that we need to kind of have this, oh, let me dog eat dog mentality. And if I help Andrea up, or if she helps me, then, she's going to get that promotion or get that man or get that whatever. Right. And so we're kind of taught to be leery of connection to other people. And that really flies in the face of what you're saying we need in truth to heal. How do you help women? And this will be my last rough question. Are you ready for it?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, here we go. How do you help women who have dealt with the betrayal part of their partner hurting them learn to trust again?
Ooh, that's good. So
I told you it's going to be tough questions.
Well, for me to be completely transparent, honest, let me tell you, I am remarried in my second marriage. But boy, oh boy, he had to work for it. And because my trust was broken with men, it really was. And so when he approached me, I actually, the things that you're not supposed to talk about when you, like, on those first dates or whatever else, when you first meet somebody, like religion, politics, money, all those you're not supposed to talk about, I talked about them because I was like, I need to know up front. Like, I've been through some hurt and stuff, and I was scared to ask those questions the first time, so I need to know now. What is your stance on finances? What are your stance on religion? What is your stance on politics? Like, I need to know those things before we even progress to conversation number 2. He's a trooper. He was a trooper. He rode with him and whatever else. But my thing was, I want to see you, and I want you to see me. I don't want to put on the fake and phony the dance show anymore. Like, I don't want to do that because that's how I got into that last situation. trying to be the perfect person, trying to portray the best, trying to see that I'm having it all together. And of course, they're doing the same thing to you. You know,
Sure.
they're not letting you see their flaws. They're showing you all their best, none of the rest. You know what I'm saying? So I wanted to see everything up front, because then I can decide, do I want to deal with that or not? And on the same thing for him, he could decide, do I want to deal with that or not?
Sure.
So that's how I did it. I'm not saying that's the best way, but I think for everyone has their own little, their little flow. But ask those hard questions. I tell my women all the time when I do group and they're talking about dating again, I said, you need to see your mate do three things. You need to see him frustrated, how he handles frustration. You need to see how he handles anger, and you need to see how he handles rejection. And by that, I'm saying not pick an argument, but sometimes you may have to pick an argument to see how does he handle when you tell him no? How does he handle his frustration? Because if he raises his voice and he acts like he's going to hit you, that's an automatic response. Okay, well, he ain't the one for me. But you need to see that up front. You don't need to wait till it happens and then he strikes you and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know he had that in him. So that's definitely how I did. But for the most part, I was just honest. I mean, and at the same time, I had my home girl with me. So every time I talk to her, and I'm like, all right, this is what I'm feeling, and she would kind of talk me off the ledge, talk me off the ledge. And the one thing she said to me that was so powerful that it's good to have people in your life who are straightforward with you and who see the real you. She's like, don't let this man pay for another man's mistakes. That is not fair. And I was like, okay, you're right. You're right.
I'm gonna need you to say that one again. Let me make sure we capture that one. That was good. That's good advice. Let me get you to say that one for me again.
Don't let another man pay for another man's mistake.
All right.
So basically what she's saying is this one's coming to you. He had nothing to do from hurting you or anything like that, but you're making him pay for the one who did hurt you.
Sure.
I said, you're right, So, I mean, she really had to, man, when you have people who tell you the truth, that's part of developing too, to make you reflect like, okay, and I can either do one or two things. I can receive it or reject it.
Yes.
If I reject it, I wouldn't grow, you know what I'm saying? So I had to receive it and face myself. I'm like, all right, you're right. Okay. It was a bitter pill to swallow.
But I agree with you. Like, I think it's important to have those people in your life who are going to tell you the truth about you, who are going to love you enough to say, look, I can't see you stay stuck. And I know what you've been through is painful, and I know that you have a right to experience it the way you're going to experience it. But there's still love and life outside of that, and try to kind of pull you or guide you or just support you out of it or through it, maybe is a better term to use.
And also with her, she had her own journey of DV, so I got to see her rise from hers. Again, her telling her story, and being that sounding board and telling me, how she was able to move and progress on. It's like, so she was able to see in me because she had did it, so you call it out, call what it is, So, and I always say a true friend is not a person who tells you what you want to hear, but a person who tells you what you need to hear. I teach that to my ladies a lot when they talk about social supports. I say, you don't want a friend that's going to co-sign everything you do and say. You want somebody to say, look, yeah, you crazy. You need to stop tripping. That ain't good.
Yeah, I tell my folks all the time, man, be careful who you let love you to death. Whether it be emotional, spiritual, mental, whatever, physical, like we can surround ourselves with people who quote unquote love us, but they'll love us right to death. They don't challenge sort of those decision makings that can ultimately put me in some pretty serious situations.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Well, look at you growing. I think that that's a fantastic thing. I think, again, I think you said it earlier and it really registered when you said it, like people will see the hero or they'll see the kind of final product of the journey, but they don't often see people in the grip of it. And so they'll look at those folks and think, well, that's great for her, but not for me. Or it's great that they could do it, but they're not like me, or they don't understand my story, or I'm not as strong as them, or I'm not as supported as them. I mean, we hear it all the time, right? Like, I can't be where they are, or I don't have the courage or the strength or the resources. To those women who might be watching this right now thinking, how do I get what Andrea has? How do I get to that place? What would be sort of your breath of wisdom for them to
breath of wisdom for what was the last part? I didn't hear you.
For them to start.
Self-reflection. Self-reflection is it's hard. Ooh, it's hard, but it's real. And if you don't know where to start in yourself, I hate to say it, but the best way to go to the person you trust the most. You know, if it's your parents, if it's your best friend, you know, high school friend, whoever, go to whoever it is you trust the most and ask them, what do you see what are my flaws?
Now, not the person you like the most, right? The person you trust the most.
The person you trust the most. Yes, ma'am. The person who, like I said, that person is going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear.
All right.
If you can't see it in yourself, ask that person, because they see it in you and they love you despite it. You know what I'm saying? Your best friends, they see your flaws and they still love you anyway. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's the person I would say. If you can't find it in yourself, go to somebody and say, what do you think my weaknesses are? What are my flaws? They can roll them out pretty quick. You're like, dang, you didn't want to think about it?
You've been keeping a list. What are you doing?
You know, for real. But I mean, like I said, they're in your corner for a reason. They're not for what you can do for them, but for who you are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I think that's fantastic advice. I do. I think that's a great, I think that's a really great place to start, because I saw somebody say one time, they said, man, the only thing in my world I can't see is myself. And so I have to be real mindful of who I put around me that act as mirrors, because what they reflect back to me is what I start to believe is true. And I remember thinking, man, that was that's really powerful. Like, if you think about it, I was like, man, I'm going to write that everywhere. What is my mirror? And just kind of see how I go from there. But okay, one last question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, to the mirror thing, and you were talking about rising and so forth, surrounding yourself by positive people also is very helpful, because that's how you get your hope and that's how you can rebuild. If you're around negativity all the time, it's hard to rebuild the negativity. I mean, it's hard. But if you're around positive people who are doing things, or even if you're not doing it, but you want to do what they're doing, being around them to soak up that wisdom, that energy, that motivation, that'll get you there. You know, you can be in an updraft, kind of, so to speak. It'll get you there.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Yeah, I think that's absolutely 100% true. You know, our attitudes about life are contagious, for sure. And if I hang out with people who want me to catch what they want or catch what they have, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Last question of the show.
All right, I'm ready.
You, if you had the opportunity to ensure that anybody watching this show today walked away with one thing, what do you hope they walk away with?
Walk away with one thing. Okay, so you can heal. That's as simple as that. You can heal.
Awesome.
Because with wounds, you know, I mean, you see people have all kind of wounds, and you see that, you know, it could be from a scar, from a surgery, from whatever. The wound represents there was an injury, there was a hurt. They may not feel it anymore, but it represents that it was a point in their life before. They may forget sometimes when you see people say, oh, what's that scar from? They may forget they even had it. You know, oh, that's when I got, you know, this, that, and the other. So the thing is that you can heal. You can heal.
I love it. Any final thoughts before we close out for today?
No, I enjoyed this. This is nice. And thank you for letting me share my story and so forth. And no, I just hope this helps somebody. You know.
Well, thank you, Andrea. And to those of you guys watching, thank you for participating in our second show of the series. Like I said, we have looked at titling it The Human Experience, just because it's real people having real conversations. It's real people engaging in just life on life's terms and connecting. And sometimes life can get messy. And so I think there's a blessing when you can have somebody sit still and talk to you about where I've been, where I am, and where I'm going. And so if you like their video, check out those that are coming into the future. So thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye.
Bye.